Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our next webinar, which is on writing an article for your local cricket club website and the local press. Before I introduce our guest, just a couple of quick grants, please, any questions for the two guys, stick them on the Q&A box, which you see is a news tab on top of your screen, and I'll pick them up throughout. And again, thank you so much for all your feedback in putting these extra webinars together. We are really fortunate. We got two guys who both have played cricket in Essex over the years, and both have worked in East London in their professional career as journalists. Firstly, I'll introduce Lee Powers. Lee Powers, the group editor at Archant, which covers over 23. He's covering over 23 papers, which includes London, Essex, Hertfordshire, Cambridgeshire, and also randomly the Southwest, which we can ask them a little bit more about in a minute. And we've also got Paul Newman. Paul is the senior cricket correspondent for the Daily Mail and has also worked over the years in Essex in his career, as well as being involved in club cricket at Essex. I'll throw the first question to you, Paul, if I can. First of all, welcome, and secondly, give the audience a bit of background on your journalism career to date.
Hi, Arthur. Well, thank you very much for asking me on. I grew up in Walthamstow in East London. And I started working there on my local paper, actually, the Waltham Forest Guardian in Walthamstow. And the way I did it was there was a careers convention at my school, Sir George Monarchs in Walthamstow, that a lot of people may know. And I was very interested in journalism. I wasn't a very good sportsman, so the next best thing seemed to be to write about it to me. I was invited in for work experience by the editor of the local paper, and started basically covering local football and cricket. Teams like in those days, Leytonstone, Ilford, Walthamstow Avenue, Woodford, Leighton Wingate. And I used to shadow the main writers there, and then they'd let me do my own reports from about 14, 15 years old, actually. And Essex cricket was a big part of our coverage as well, which was great for me as a young Essex member. I got to get in the press box, and they let me do reports on Sunday league games, John Player league games in those days. And I got a staff job there at 16. Very fortunate to get a job that young, very unusual, certainly be very difficult now, I think, but that's the way it was in those days. So when I was offered the job, I went for it. I sort of forgot about any ideas of further education, but thankfully it worked out. And I worked on the Waltham Forest Guardian news desk initially, but I didn't like the idea of news coverage. I remember having to go and knock on someone's door whose husband had just been shot, and ask them how they felt in just off Leighton High Road. I remember that, things like that. It was all very very tough stuff. So I wanted to get into sport as quickly as possible. They let me work in sport quite quickly, and became sports editor there. And it was great. I covered Leighton Orient quite home and away, which I adored. Frank Clark was the manager there then, and had a good relationship with him. I adored doing that. Essex cricket coverage, and also of course cricket club coverage was a big part of what we did, and we relied on submitted reports. In those days, of course, this is a long time ago, so there's no websites, there's no social media, there's nothing like that in those days. So we relied very much on submitted reports from the likes of your club once did, because we branched out to Redbridge, but Walthamstow, Chingford, all the big, lots of great clubs in the area. So we tried to give them as much space as possible. And obviously there were limits on space in those days, but we tried to give them as much space as possible. And I had a very happy time doing that before I moved into national papers a bit later on.
Brilliant. And obviously currently both I suppose worked in broadsheet and now tabloids, so you've got a lovely three-way career, if you like. So we'll tap into a little bit of that knowledge. Thank you so much, Paul. Lee, over to you. So as I said, a sports editor for 23 newspapers, but before that, how did you get into journalism, and what was your journey to date?
Well, grew up in Dagenham, went to secondary school, Robert Clack. Very few cricket games played on a concrete strip there back in the mid-80s, late 80s. But did my work experience when I was studying GCSEs in what would be year 10 at the Dagenham Post, which was just across the road from the school. Then went to the Times when I was studying May levels to do work experience there for a couple of weeks. on to Nottingham Trent University for a broadcast journalism degree for 3 years in the early 90s. Come out of that, freelanced for about a year with a TV production company in Hertfordshire. Then a vacancy come up on the Romford Recorder, late 96. Got on the staff then, worked there for close to 3 years, covering all local sport, the non-league scene, the local club cricket scene. So I would be up at, remember some early trips to Haven Atty Bowers, lovely little Brox Hill Road ground with the view of the borough all down below, but also off to, Gideon Park up into Harren Green, all those main sort of Havering clubs.
We seem to have lost you there for a second, Lee. You're back.
Sorry, I didn't come in call there. I'm sorry, should have turned
That's
off.
all right.
So Telegraph for a couple of years, and then back to the Romford Recorder in July 2001. Been there ever since. In 2013, became the group sports editor for 5 papers that we cover in East London. So that was Barking, Ilford, Newham, Romford, and the East London Advertiser. So all of a sudden started reaching out to more clubs on those patches, all the Ilford clubs that we cover, yourself, Wanstead, South Woodford, Fives, anyone that was on that patch. Also the other leagues that sort of play in East London, the Barking and Newham clubs. And in the last sort of few years as well, I added the Hearts titles to my portfolio, and then the Southwest as well. But an Essex lad, born and bred, used to go over to the Valentine's Park festivals when I was younger, getting AB's autograph after play, and seeing Gucci score a ton in a session, those sort of things. So that's my sort of homeland, and having sort of really, come up from the Romford Recorder, that those clubs remain the ones that I'm, closest to, I guess. Cultivated the biggest contacts over the last sort of, best part of 20 plus years. So, yeah, big fan. Not made a great standard or much of my own, but big cricket fan, and always happy to engage with the clubs and get the word out there. And the last few years as well, working closely with the success that the boys have had. So, yeah, it's been really good, especially with all the local blood coming through and playing for us these days.
No, brilliant, Lee. We will tap a bit more into your cricket background, which brings me nicely onto Paul. Obviously, you touched on your early days as a journalist working in Waltham Forest, but you haven't quite given up your roots involvement in club cricket. How have you kept your close sort of affinity with club cricket?
Well, when I was very young, I played for Walthamstow, just off Wood Street there, a brilliant ground, great club, very good club. Yeah, pretty much just in the Colts section. I did captain the under-18s for a little while. That's about as high as I got. And as Lee mentioned there, Valentine's Park. I was another one who grew up watching Gucci dominate at Valentine's Park and Alan Border against Malcolm Marshall, that sort of stuff. And I remember playing there for Walthamstow against Ilford, and that was like the sort of that was the ultimate for me. I was going to play where I'd seen Gucci and everybody play, and then a very young leg spinner called Nasser Hussain got me out at first ball, so that ruined my Valentine Park experience. But there we are. He was younger than me as well, but he was a bit of an upstart, and that was me gone. But so I played for Walthamstow up to under 18 level, but the highest I got, I wasn't very good, to be honest. I was a keeper batsman. I wasn't very good. I played in the third 11 for Walthamstow. But journalism started taking over as well, actually. And of course, in those days, you were expected to be available on a Saturday and a Sunday. If you were a young kid trying to make the grade in club cricket, they expected good availability, and as soon as you got into journalism, you were working weekends, so that didn't make it very, very easy. I don't think I would have got very much higher than the third 11 if I'd stayed, to be honest. But basically, I drifted away. Started playing cricket in a 20 over club companies league when I joined the Walthamstow Guardian. I got a cricket team together, and the early 2020 cricket, of course, we used to play in Chingford and Walthamstow, local farm near the Walthamstow market. But because I could never get enough players each week, I used to bring in friends really who had played at school but had sort of drifted away from the game, and they all got the bug again. So we decided to launch our own cricket club, and this was about 35 years ago now. It started off bizarrely called Oral Sculpture Cricket Club, which is named after a Stranglers song. Don't ask me why. Then we became the Garden Cricket Club because a few of the players started playing in their one of the players' dad's back garden. And then we realised there wasn't a Chigwell Cricket Club, and that was obviously a great name, and there wasn't a proper Chigwell Cricket Club, so we changed our name to Chigwell. and the club's still going. It's still doing well. It plays in a league. I can't even remember the name of the league now. I haven't played for many years, but
Essex and Middlesex League.
That's the one. Yeah, I think it's that one. Yeah. I haven't played for a long time, but they asked me to be president last year, which I was very happy to accept as one of the founder members. 3 of the founder members still play, even though they're older than me. They're getting on for 60 now, so but they still play. And yeah, the club's thriving and it's great, and it helps me keep in touch with local cricket, really.
That's brilliant. We won't mention the celebrity musicians you have in your cricket club. We'll keep that to our audience to research. Lee, I'm going to throw the key question of the webinar, which is in effect, as a sports editor, as the cricket correspondent in your earlier days, when writing a report for you from a cricket club perspective, or for your own website if you're a local club, what advice would you give? What's the key structure behind any report you're looking for?
I mean, ideally, we're looking for, good detail that sort of tells the story from behind the scorecard. We can look at a scorecard and guesstimate, what sort of happened in the game, looking at, partnerships that have been built. You can work out quite a bit yourself, but it's the finer detail, like knowing if someone's come off of, a run of 4 or 5 ducks to sort of get some vital runs, or a guy that's been called up at the last minute on the morning of the game and then he's contributed in a certain way with a couple of key catches out in the deep or whatever, and knowing those finer details about, how those catches were taken. Was it, down at the ankle? Was it a dive? Was it, right above the head? It's just the sort of info that, you're not going to know unless you've seen it with your own eyes. And obviously, guys don't get out to as many games nowadays. So, if a batsman's batting in a particular way, a load of good driving or pulling, or whatever the sort of detail to an innings there might have been. It's understanding the sort of what's happened sort of behind those. So as much as
saying.
It's switched off. I don't know why.
We like to inform and entertain the readers. So those sort of finer details are always good to know.
But before I go to Paul, little sort of things like structure, how many words, how do you build the story? What's the trick? What's the art behind it?
Yeah.
Well, now,
sorry.
So I'll go Lee first, and I'll come back to you on that. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah. Nowadays we're fixed at space for 200, 400 words on a page. So they're the sort of word counts that we give out really to people that want to submit reports, 200 or 400 words. Obviously, we put anything longer, but I want people to think, to be sitting there scratching their heads about how to put it together too much, because we can work with some, a list of bullet points really, and we can then put the meat on the bone as such. Appreciate that it might not come too easily for people that are trying to write reports, but if someone can get us a list of details that would help flesh out, and we can build the sentences around that. But yeah, I mean, generally, you've got to decide what angle is from the piece. So if that individual that has been missing for months because of injury or weddings and holidays, then come in and helps get his team over the line, then to have that background is always good. So
yeah, and I'll throw that similar to you, Paul, regarding structure. What is the key? What's the art that I suppose what the editor wants, as well as the reader?
Yeah, it's as much human interest as possible. I think Lee's described it perfectly. When I did these things, you used to say to people, just please tell us things that you can't learn from the scorecard. Really, we can see the scores, we can see what's happened, but how did it happen? As Lee said, you've got to bring the eyes to it. Really, you've got to describe what happened, and also bring some depth to it. Bring us the backstory of someone. Is it, as Lee said, is it the end of a long run of poor form? Were they injured for a long time? What do they do an interesting job that you can bring in it? So I think that's always of an interest to people. So and so who in his day job does this. Here he is scoring his 400 in a row for us. Is it and just put it all into perspective really, and I guess do it as concisely as possible as well. Really, you don't want to sort of waste words on it, but you want as much detail that you can't get from the scorecard without forgetting the sort of salient facts.
Yeah, I'll throw my next sort of within that quotes, how important are quotes? And then when you're seeking quotes, and Lee, I'll go to you first again. When you're seeking for quotes, what in effect are you trying to get when a player who scored 100 or taken a fiver gives you a quote?
It's generally like, it's the how does it feel, to hit that landmark or produce that sort of performance. I mean, over the last few years, we've tried to get the reporters to sort of a bit more often for sort of some preview quotes and use those more so than the sort of the bare dips from a match touch. But yeah, when you're trying to get a line from a player, it's to get the feeling, of how they are afterwards, that personal touch and what it means to them to have put that together on the day.
Fair, and probably throw that same question to you, Paul. I know as a sort of journalist in international sport, the press conference or the pre-match captain sort of comments at the toss, but press conference at the end for tomorrow's paper is obviously important. What are you looking for? What are you searching for?
Something other than the obvious, I guess, really. These guys, certainly international level, are so well media trained now that they can come out with a lot of stuff that's not particularly interesting. And the key, I think, is not wasting it on obvious quotes. I always sort of do, in my mind, a sort of flip test. Would it be more interesting if they said exactly the opposite of what they said? I'm delighted to score 100. Well, it'd be a better story if you were upset to score 100. So don't waste it. Don't wait. Only use quotes that enhance something. I think. I mean, I know. From our paper's point of view, you'd probably have a quote story separately to the match report. I wouldn't include any quotes in a match report on a day's play of England. We'd have a separate story of what's been said in the press conference afterwards. If you are combining the two, which of course you do in some instances, don't waste space with anodyne quotes really and obvious quotes. Just always try to make sure that they enhance the story. If it is a local player who's had a terrible time, with injury or even in his private life, and he's coming out of this to score 100 or take 7 wickets, tell us a bit about that. Tell us what they've been through. Tell us, what their background is, how long they've been playing. Is this their first big score? And make sure the quotes relate to that really than just the obvious. I was delighted to score runs, or I was delighted to take wickets, and really pleased that we won the game. So avoid that sort of stuff, really.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful actually. That and makes absolute sense. Lee, I suppose your pen bug, your sort of bugs, if you like, the ones you don't like as an editor. What would they be, and what would you really, if you were to give your tips of what I really want from local clubs, what would that be?
What we see quite a lot of is reports come through and you might be missing a first name, or you might only get a first name and a surname, or you're going to get a nickname sent instead of either of those. So you're then having to go back to, to get the proper information, because I appreciate that guys want to put something together for the web, for the club. So, the banter element might be fine for that platform, but if we want to put stuff up on our website or in the paper, we need to be reporting the proper information. So we need both names, no nicknames, please, unless it's a cracker that has got some sort of relevance. But generally, we're trying to tell the news properly as such. So making sure we've got both names of people that you want to mention, not because that might not always be obvious from a card anyway. So that's the main one, and other than that, we can sort of work with whatever gets sent, really, as long as it's not going to run to like 1,000 words, because, that's only going to take the writer too long, and then it's going to take us too long to edit it back. So that's why, the word count guide is always a key sort of pointer to raise as well. That, that was one of the lessons I was taught when I was on work experience at the time. You given a word count, you stick to that. So bear that in mind.
I'll take that question a little bit further, keeping it local as the local papers. What is timelines? Now, obviously, Saturday, Sunday is your usual recreational league games. Your website is obviously active all the time, but your local press for whatever paper you're working will have their cut-off date. Is there a rule of thumb you like club cricket members to share, to work with rather?
I mean, it's tricky because the papers we put out in the East London Essex area have all got different deadlines. So the Barkingham editions go to print sort of Tuesday afternoon, just after lunch. So the earlier we get that information in, the better. Ilford on a Wednesday afternoon and Romford on a Thursday afternoon. So you've got a bit more time to play with. But, you know, the quicker guys can turn stuff around and get it to us, then, you know, ideally we can get it up online at the early part of the week. So the idea would be that, you know, we can work with reports to start off with, and then maybe run reaction pieces in the middle of the week, and then preview pieces at the end of the week, looking ahead to the next weekend. So, you know, the earlier the better. Bishop guys are going to be doing this, are probably going to be doing it on lunch breaks or whatever. But the earlier in the week, the better. Especially, you know, if you've played on the Saturday, you don't really want to be waiting until Wednesday to hear about sort of finer detail. So,
yeah, anything to add to that, Paul, from your perspective?
No, it's interesting. You know, when I worked in local papers, obviously you had to wait till the following Thursday before it come out. You know, it's just so different now, isn't it, to get it up as quickly as possible. You would think if the game's on at the weekend, as Lee was saying, you would hope to get those up on the website as soon as possible after the games, wouldn't you? And that when it's fresh in people's memories. Just adding to what Lee was saying about nicknames or whatever, I think accuracy is a big thing as well. You know, just always make sure you spell names right. My first chief sub-editor who at the Daily Mail, a guy called Ken Wilson, you had to write to him for shifts, and he spelt Wilson with 2 L's, which was very unusual. And his first big test was if anybody just sent him a letter asking for shifts and spelt Wilson the conventional way with 1 L, that was them gone, because they hadn't checked that he spelt his name differently, you know. So it always check that you've spelt names right. As Lee said, always give full names. If someone has got an interesting nickname, put that in as well and explain why they're called that, maybe if it's suitable for a family publication. But you know, always check for accuracy and figures. You know, figures in cricket are so important, aren't they? Make sure you get everything right. If the bloke has had a run of 50s, find out whether it is 550s or 650s or whatever. But most importantly, you know, get their name right, and if they've got connections like yourself with a twin who plays as well, you know, if they're brothers or whatever, you know, tell us about the family connections and anything which adds to that human interest, really.
Yeah, it's easy. Ask all the runs. So it's pretty easy, that one. I lied to myself, mate. And also, obviously, just to add to that, opposition names. It's amazing how many times people go, you know, they're number 3 or
exactly. Take the effort to find those sort of details out, because it really does help. It helps the people, you know, working on in the offices, but it also just makes the report much more attractive to the reader, doesn't it? If there's proper detail in there, just because the opposition player is not known to you, you know, make the effort to find out how he spells his name and anything else interesting about him, really.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Change this question a little bit. Go to you first on this one, Paul. The concept of recruiting, and I say that, you know, what would you say to anyone watching the webinar now in regards of trying to find someone in the club? Classic, most clubs, it's the same guy who is the chairman, rolls the outfield, and whatnot. Is there a way a club can recruit internally certain skills, characteristics they can look for to get a reporter?
There must be people in the club who are keen on doing this, I would have thought. Maybe a youngster, maybe in my case, when I was 14 or 15, you know, I was just mad keen on writing about it and doing as much reports as I can. There must be people like that within a club. They don't have to be young, you know, but I'd say find someone who's got a real interest in it, who really enjoys writing. Maybe, you know, ideally as someone who's got a flair for it. They don't have to be a professional, obviously, or want to be a journalist as such, but someone who's going to take a real interest in it, a real pride over doing it, who'll do it, you know, religiously and won't let it drift, as Lee said, to Wednesday or Thursday when it's you know, when the game's almost a week old, and someone who really sees that as their thing within the club, not the poor person, as you say, which every club has got, who does so many jobs. And I better try and, you know, spend 5 minutes on doing the report as well as their umpteenth job of the week for the club. If you can find someone within, not necessarily the cult section, but I think in many ways it's nice if it's a younger person who's very keen, and that's their job. And they can you know, ring up the captain of the first 11 or whatever to find out more details that they haven't got from themselves seeing the match if they're not at the match or whatever. But you know, just find someone who's going to take pride over it, really, and do a good job. Because if the copy comes in and it's really nice and it's well written and it's not too long and it's got all the relevant details in there, it's a dream for sports editors, and you'll be amazed how quickly your club will we'll gain great coverage, you know, and they'll get to the top of the tree of top of the list of people you want to help and promote, because they're helping you.
Absolutely. Lee, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was lucky that I knew from an early age that I wanted to be a journalist. So, you know, I would file my sort of little football reports to the local paper every week. So, yeah, if there's youngsters involved at clubs that are maybe doing media studies at school, or they're particularly interested in media, then encourage that. And like I say, don't be daunted by the fact that they need to sit there and write a 1,000-word masterpiece. It could literally be a very short snapshot, 200 words, or worst case scenario, you know, just 6, 8, 10 pertinent points that, you know, help back up the scorecard details that, you know, give us a bit more background, so we can actually then get to writing the piece ourselves at the other end. But, you know, without those raw materials, it's tough at our end to then put the stuff together in the first place. So, yeah, I just encourage any youngsters out there to give it a shot, you know, read as much as they can to sort of maybe get a bit of an idea, you know, websites or, you know, the national papers, expand their vocabulary, and you find that, you know, it may well help support some schoolwork they've got to do. So, yeah, just impress on the youngsters that it's a chance really to practice a craft that they might end up taking into a career. Get their names seen, you know, happy to give bylines to people if they're going to submit stuff and want to be taking it seriously. So.
Yeah, and I'm going to probably just change the question a little bit and go to you first, Lee. We've obviously spoke about reports, but you've been very supportive around clubs that are trying to promote events, the alternative cricket team being one of them, from a county sort of perspective. What changes when a club is contacting you to say, look, we want to promote an event or something like that? What would you look for to get the maximum sort of support?
Yeah, well, I'm more than happy to help clubs get a bit of exposure for any sponsors that help in there. If they're, you know, good causes, they're trying to raise money for charities and what have you. So it's the standard, you know, what is it, where is it, when is it, why are you doing it? Those sort of questions, you know, and be involved. So again, it can only, you know, we could deal with just a few sort of snippets of information. If it's prior to an event, it would still to maybe have a photograph. If not, then you want to photograph post-event to sort of help publicise the fact that this has taken place. But yeah, again, it's just the key information. Make sure that the right people are going to be name checked, and the sponsor correctly, obviously. But yeah, if companies sort of putting their hand in the pocket to help clubs, you know, we're more than happy to give that a bit of exposure to, you know, help.
No, that's brilliant, Lee. And Paul, I might just twist the question a little bit without at all accusing any organisation to get promotion like the Emirates, Old Trafford or whatnot. But what's I'll probably give them one little tip, but what's a little tip to get the sponsors in the press that you could maximise or utilise?
That's a good question, actually, because we haven't got a hard, at the Mail, we haven't really got a hard or fast policy on that one, but it came up quite recently in that the two venues we're going to see used for all international cricket this summer, it seems, are the Ageas Bowl and Old Trafford. And that's what we were calling them in copy, you know, the Ageas Bowl, even though, you know, to me it's the Rose Bowl, which is a much nicer name, but that's what it's called now. And you can't really call it the Rose Bowl anymore. But the press officer at Lancashire, a really nice guy, sent me a note saying, look, you know, I understand why, but we are the Emirates Old Trafford. And we'd be really grateful if you could call it that as well, really, because you're saying the Ageas Bowl and Old Trafford and you're leaving out our sponsor. And obviously you do that because it's an iconic name, isn't it? And it's easier to just say Old Trafford, really, because that's what everybody knows it has. Whereas the other place, the Ageas Bowl, you can't just call it the Bowl. So you name the sponsor. But the sponsors are obviously incredibly important in sport and incredibly important in cricket. I find the best ones, you know, I've worked with lots of sponsors over the years who sponsor Test cricket, for instance. And the best ones are the ones who are not pushy, who understand the media, who understand you can't just say the first Cornhill Test match or the first, you know, Empower Test match. Most of them would like you to mention in copy, but the best ones will understand that you can't just sort of like emblazon it everywhere. It has to be quite subtle. And I think you're more inclined to help. The guy at Lancashire was so nice about it and made such a valid point. And he also understood where we were coming from, because Old Trafford is such an iconic venue that he realised why we weren't doing it. But since then, we've made an effort to make sure we do call it Emirates Old Trafford, certainly the first mention. And I think if sponsors sort of try and understand the media, most media won't have an issue in sort of trying to help them back, really, because they are so important to cricket. The Oval, we keep on having to remember now, it's the Kia Oval. You know, it hasn't helped that the Oval's had a few different names. We had the Foster's Oval. What else we had? There was something else. The Brit Oval, wasn't it? Yeah. And then Kia. So the worst thing you can do is forget the sponsor and start calling it the Brit Oval or the Foster's Oval again. You know, but it's better just call it the Oval than that. But one of the most famous names in cricket doesn't sound quite right when you call it the Kia Oval. But you've got to appreciate how important their money is to Surrey and to the Oval, and call it that when you can, really, to try and give something back to the sponsors.
No, thank you. That's very good advice. Lee, I might throw you into there. A few tricks, but I don't know, man of the match, you can maybe name it under the local curry house. Is there anything that you could put onto the local papers to keep supporting or pushing club sponsors?
Well, anything like that. I mean, I know the Upminster guys at Wimwack and their team are all named after, you know, local businesses that have sponsored them. So, and actually down in the southwest, actually, down there do, like you just mentioned, they mentioned the fact that their man of the matches are sponsored by certain, you know, local businesses. So, yeah, any little elements like that that help. You know, obviously, these people are helping these clubs, and it's only a tiny thing, but you know, to put their name in print is no big deal. I don't see at our end on that local scale. So yeah, just include it, and it'll always be given, you know, due consideration.
Brilliant. And Lee, I'll throw the next one to you as well. But obviously, in COVID-19, normally it would have been the summer cricket season. I'd have been nicking off for naught again on a Saturday and getting the rightful abuse. But what's kept the cricket busy, and what are you seeking right now? If you had an audience, which we are covering Essex and Hertfordshire and other parts, what advice would you say in regards to getting information and stories to you in the current climate?
Just keep. I mean, luckily, some sort of people are now holding net sessions. Obviously, you know, the alternative cricket events taking place. We have we did the stuff with the Essex boys, donating the equipment with Supporting Humanity, the meals rather, sorry. And we've done the alternative cricket tea stories in Romford the last couple of weeks with Harold Wood and Raynham. So any other clubs that have got stuff, you know, now happening, get the information to us. It's very hard, you know, the amount of clubs we're covering to be just double checking every sort of now and again to see what might be posted on their website or what might be on their social media accounts. It's always better if stuff can just come to our fingertips. Don't want to sound lazy, but it's trying times at this point to sort of juggle quite a bit. So yeah, just don't be shy in any information that you want to share. Challenges. Some of the other clubs earlier this summer had their race nights, quiz nights, managed to sort of pick up a few bits like that. And I've also started listening to some podcasts and turning some of that into information for pieces as well. So it's about the can take place on a regular basis. We've been looking at features, so we've been picking out a few older members from across some of our clubs, running sort of long chat pieces with those, just sort of keep cricket visible in the pages. Hopefully we will put some action later in the summer, but for the time being, you know, any that's got a story to tell about or, you know, an event, and yeah, by all means, please do get in touch.
Yeah, I'll probably repeat. We lost you just a little bit, Lee, but just for the listeners and viewers' perspective, any stories involving either the cricket activities within cricket clubs, or anything that your members are doing in response to obviously the current COVID-19 situation. You could have heroes within your clubs, alternative cricket tea with food banks and food collection points. Please get in touch with Lee. I know I can only speak from my own perspective. It's been super helpful. Paul, next question, and probably the final one for me before we go quickly into the Q&A box. Sorry, I've got two questions, apologies. Use of images, and what's the thumb of rule? Do you have a rule?
Not really. I mean, in our case, we have a picture editor picking out what they think are the best pictures of the day. Really, I think it's easier these days, isn't it? In that everybody's got a camera, and somebody could get that great shot. But you just want a great picture of the most important thing of the day, really. Whether that's a batsman scoring 100, or someone taking a hat trick, or a celebration, or something. You know, in the case of at the Oval last year in the first World Cup match when Ben Stokes took that fantastic catch on the boundary against South Africa. Has somebody got that picture really, or a good image of that? And you've normally got at international matches, you've got photographers spotted around the ground. So I just think you just want a nice, clear action picture of the story of the day really, and that applies as much to clubs as it does to the England team. And if you're able to submit with your report a nice picture of the person you're talking about in the copy, so that illustrates it perfectly, I think. So there's no hard or fast rules, just nice, clean, concise pictures and newsy pictures of the best thing that's happened that day.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And Lee, I know you're because people do send in stuff on mobile phones and stuff. What's your rule of thumb from recreational?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the more images we can get sent in from clubs, the better. As Paul's touched on, anyone that's performed well, upright, or even a landscape, really, standing by a scoreboard for a bit of context. Team shots, team shots are always really good because they're going to be landscape and they will obviously represent the club. And also, it might help to just send in some generic shots from around the ground, the clubhouse, some signage, anything that, by looking at, distinctively is that club. So anything that can, support a story from that club is worth giving some consideration to. So, but yeah, landscape is always a key rather than the uprights, because if it's not a landscape image, it probably won't be any good on the website. So.
No, that's good advice. I'm going to go to the Q&A box. Gents, one for both of you. So Paul, if you want to go first on this one, can Paul and Lee have, Lee have provide any tips for a young writer to hook a reader in at the start of a sports article? That's from Quinton. I'm hoping Quinton's trying to be a journalist, which I think is a good question. So start in your report. How do you catch the reader?
It is a good question, and I was always told treat it like a pyramid. There's obviously a big difference between journalese, as it were, and an essay or a piece of written English. So you almost want to get hook the reader by doing the most interesting thing first, and then build it out like a pyramid. That's what I was told. Probably, God knows how many years ago now, and I think it still applies now as it did then. So your intro is all important, really, Quentin. You need to say something that's going to attract the reader. If you don't get that right and you turn them off in the first par or two, then you're struggling to keep their attention. So I'm not saying it needs to be sensationalist or anything like that. And obviously, there's different ways of going into something. You can get a very newsy way of getting into it, or you could have what we call a drop intro and make it a bit more featurey, where you're painting a picture and then you're hitting them with the most relevant information a little bit lower down. But really, you've got to make it interesting from the word go. So the most important paragraph is the first one. So put an awful lot of thought into that, and then possibly the next most important is your last one, because you've got to get a sort of payoff really, and you've got to just have the final word. So I think it is very important, and I'd treat it like that pyramid and try and grab their attention from the word go.
Yeah, that's really good, Paul. I like that. Lee, anything to add in your own?
Yeah, same. I mean, it's what's the angle, and from the very beginning, you've got to make sure. I mean, ideally, headlines catch the eye to start off with, being bigger font on the page. But like Paul says, if the intro isn't interesting enough to start off with, then people are unlikely to sort of read further down the piece. So yeah, make it a good punchy intro, and keep an eye out for the unusual as well if you're going to be writing pieces. Something that isn't sort of standard procedure maybe during a match. It's always handy to throw in something a little quirky for to entertain the reader. But as Paul says, with that pyramid, it gives you the chance to sort of flesh out further the further you go down with the other detail, and then and a good ending just to sort of round it up. So.
That's a brilliant analogy. I like that. Thank you, Lee. And Paul, final question from the Q&A before we wrap up from Len, and he's broke it down to 4 sections. But what is most popular with your readers? Ideally, I know it's an open question, but for adults, men, women, juniors, is there a theme that you're trying to get across?
I mean, that can vary, I think, really. I mean, there's so many different parts to a sports section, aren't there? From our point of view, in the Mail, you'd have match reports on the England matches and on the big football matches. Sadly, not so many county matches these days. I think that applies to all papers as well, and even websites, not just necessarily tabloids. But it's getting that mixture, isn't it? So you have a match report, you'll have a quote story, you want to try and get a mixture of news and features, you want nice interviews as well. So I think you want to get that blend really, and of knowing what the people want. And I think, you know, in the industry, you'd like to think of that people want their news, and you're sort of judged by how many stories you can break. But at the same time, I think people like a good read. And in this time, when this whole crisis started, we wondered what we were going to fill the pages with. But we've had, I'm sure Lee's the same, we've had no trouble whatsoever filling the pages, because it's been an opportunity to speak to a lot of different people who you wouldn't necessarily have room to include if you were covering matches every day. And we all know how much international cricket there is, so that dominates our coverage. And we've had no trouble at all. There's always issues. I mean, there's lots of issues in football on how they're going to come back and what have you. That dominates a lot of the coverage. But people don't want to read that, you know, at the expense of anything else. They want good personalities. They want good people to read about, a bit of nostalgia maybe. I've done something last couple of days on 30 years since Graham Gooch scored 333 at Lord's against India, which is, it's the 30th anniversary next month, and sort of anniversary journalism is quite a good one if you find, you know, so what happened 30 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I had a good chat with Graham Gooch this week, and other people involved in that match, which I'm hoping to do in the next few days. And that's a real pleasure doing something like that. So in answer to the question, it's a bit long-winded answer really, but I think it's a variety, and you can't say there's any one thing that readers particularly go for, but the knack is finding out the blend that attracts your readers in the first place.
No, brilliant. I like that. Lee, anything to add to that?
Similarly, I mean, some people will still sort of say, why are there no reports in the paper anymore? And obviously, you know, space is tight and the world has changed. So with the digital age, we try to get reports online first and foremost. And then we try to bring something different, i.e. the quote pieces from the local club captains for the print edition. And, you know, you find sometimes that they go down quite well. I mean, they will go online as well, but people will probably be quite interested to see what someone's take is on a performance or on a match. But similarly, you know, with the current sort of situation, it has been a good opportunity to engage with some of the characters out there, and had some feedback about some of the feature pieces, some of the longer reads that we've done with some of the guys that have been playing at our local clubs for the last 30, 40, 50 years. You know, it's been nice to get on the phone to these old boys, you know, for half an hour, you know, hear their life story, and then write sort of 800-900 words about them. So, you know, it's just something a bit different in the absence of, you know, the standard sort of run-of-the-mill weekly reports and reactions. So, yeah, there's different strokes for different folks, you know. So all kinds of coverage will please different people. Would like to do more, you know, because hopefully, you know, mums, dads, and granddads will then buy the paper still to read about their grandson or granddaughter playing in matches. So, yeah, never averse to sort of hearing about junior cricket either. So, yeah, bear that in mind.
Brilliant. And I know we've gone over time, but the final question, just to round it up. Paul, I'll throw it at you first. What's your sort of rule of thumb? I don't know, if you to wrap it up to any budding journalist or anyone writing their first report for their local club or local press, what advice would you give them?
Well, enjoy it, and you know, treat it as diligently and with as much dedication as you can. If you're thinking about it as a career, make sure you get a degree. Don't do what I did. Do what Lee did. Get a degree. So I was very lucky to get in without one. So I think if you're thinking about doing it seriously, that's something to very much bear in mind. But if you're doing it in this regard to get, you know, to promote your local club or to whatever, just you know, always remember accuracy. Always remember, be as concise as possible. Too much enthusiasm can be a negative. If you, as Lee said earlier, if you do write 1,000 words, that's going to cause problems really. Someone's got to go through all that to try and find the most interesting. Just make it as interesting as possible. It doesn't have to be sort of superbly written. You don't have to have a degree in English to do it, but you do have to have basic, you know, good grammar and punctuation. And get as much interesting stuff in there as possible, really, and just broaden it out, as we say, widen it out from that scoreboard if you're doing reports for the local paper or for your club website or whatever, and make it as interesting as possible. Maybe a bit of humour if you can, but don't overdo that, you know, only if it works. And just get as much. I know I've used the term human interest a few times today, but that's key, I think. Just paint a picture. Don't just rely on so and so scored 50 or so and so won the game by 4 wickets. You know, because that's a bit of a turn off. You've got to make it more interesting than that.
Oh, brilliant. And to wrap up, Lee, from you?
Yeah, avoid repetition, make every word count really, and obviously stick to the word count. But yeah, that would be just give it a go. You know, don't fear into some feedback. But yeah, because we've all got to start somewhere. So just give it a go, and hopefully you'll enjoy doing it. And over a period of time, you'll improve, and you won't need an editor's touch too much at the other end.
Brilliant. Sound advice. Look, Lee and Paul, thank you so much. I know you are relatively busy, so we do appreciate you taking time out and sharing your insight and knowledge, and some brilliant insight and knowledge, if I do say so myself. Finally, just to let everybody know, the next webinar, we've got a slight break on Tuesday, is next Thursday, and that is creating a development plan. That again is back on all of our viewers who are fed back to say what a good development plan looks like, what structure of a development plan should look like. And obviously in the current COVID-19, it's an excellent time just to review and reflect on that, as well as a club and your future planning. From all of us, thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harren.
Cheers, guys.